Poverty in British Columbia. Why does poverty even exist in British Columbia? Poverty should not exist in British Columbia or anywhere in Canada. But, that's where we are right now. There's a lot of recommendations put out there, high recommendations to put an end to legislative poverty. So we will find out because my next guest is going to talk all about that. Stay tuned, everyone. Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to PWD Allies podcast. My name is Brent Frey, and I'm the host. And please like and subscribe and share the content that you're viewing or you're hearing today, especially on the podcast version. Check out your favorite app, wherever you find it best suited for you. Today, I have a special guest joining me from BC Poverty Reduction Coalition, the director for the organization, Rowan Burdge. Hello, Rowan. Long time.
Hello. Well, I just wanted to say for people that aren't aware, we had you on the podcast way back. It was on our first year. Our first year on this format, on the YouTube format, was back in started in January of 2023, and we had you on the podcast. It was show number 9. Actually, was it show number 9? Yeah, it was show number 9 of season 1, so 2023, and that was March 23rd, 2023 is when we had you on. Wow. And you came on after Vivica Ellis. And of course, yeah. Vivica Ellis used to be with you guys as well. And I got to know her through Single Mothers Alliance when it was called that. And I kind of partnered up with her about the clawback issue and all that kind of thing. So I just wanted to put that in context that you haven't been on the podcast for a while, but I also wanted to say that that I've been following the BC Poverty Reduction Coalition for like a long time. Even before like my clawback was an issue. It was like I went on, this is the backstory. I went on Twitter. The reason I went on Twitter originally was to sell my book, my Daddy Bent Legs book. It was a memoir, and somebody suggested, oh well, to advertise your book, to sell your book, go on Twitter and just do a whole bunch of ads on Twitter about it. And so that was around 2010. And,
oh wow!
And I know you guys have been around since 2009.
Yeah, exactly.
And the reason why I got to know the BC Poverty Reduction Coalition is because when I was on Twitter, one of the first things I did is I kind of tried to reach out to anything that was kind of disability related. And Poverty Reduction Coalition was one of those ones that kind of kept coming up. And I thought, well, I'm going to follow that. And so even before all my clawback issue, because it didn't happen till, like August 2013. So even before all that, I was still following the BC Poverty Reduction Coalition. So I just want to say that I go way back almost to where you guys started from. Yeah.
It's like for myself, I've been following BC Poverty Reduction Coalition for quite some time. It starts back from way back from when I started a lot of advocacy and holding the provincial government accountable for inaction. It always stems back to Rowan, the report that came out in 2021. I'm still really uptight about that. The government still hasn't complied with the January 28th, 2021, a lot of the high recommendations, and they're still outstanding. And I guess that's where we'll start the show is, wow, I mean, that report, and then we'll fast forward going forward to the provincial budget that we just had on March 4th of 2025.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. And yeah, thank you for that. I will say we celebrated our sweet 16th birthday last year for the Poverty Reduction Coalition.
Yeah.
Yay! Happy birthday.
But,
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah. So if we can kind of maybe you want to start with too, like kind of what you've been up to the last little while. Like what are your big initiatives that you're rolling out for the year? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just a quick intro for myself. My name's Rowan. I use she and they pronouns. I'm the Provincial Director of the BC Poverty Reduction Coalition. And for those that don't know, the coalition is made up of About 85, 90 organizations across BC that come together to do anti-poverty work under a bigger umbrella. So we look towards more systemic upstream policy approaches to poverty reduction and eradication. Ideally, we want to get rid of poverty, not just reduce it. And yeah, the past couple of years have been extremely busy for the coalition, and I'm sure unsurprising to anyone who's seeing sort of the social conditions happening around us. But our biggest sort of last push was around the provincial election to do a little bit more awareness around a few different campaign areas. One is raise the rates, always top of mind for us, really important. Another was a dignified transit system for everybody. So ensuring that, hoping that low income people can access free transit, and seniors, and, sort of focusing on some of the equity deserving groups first, but with the ultimate goal that folks would have free transit in British Columbia. And we see that as a public service and a public good.
Mhm.
The third piece was around housing. We all know that there's a huge housing crisis in BC, and that, that is causing many, many problems, including deep levels of poverty. And so that's kind of the third focus area we've been having. So we did a lot of mobilizing around the provincial election, doing a lot of like going to town halls, putting out materials. We had a big postcard campaign around poverty reduction goals that we presented, hundreds of them to the minister. And then, yeah, starting in 2025, we have a few, going to continue on with the campaign work. Definitely housing as a human right is top of mind for us right now.
Mhm.
And then the new poverty reduction plan, which I'm sure we'll get into, coming out last year, there's a couple of key pieces in there that we're hoping to kind of move forward around. Removing the spousal cap is one that I'm
That's a big one.
It's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that I kind of wanted to start with too, and I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but do you remember, this is going back a bit. This is going back to July 2011. There was a report called "The Cost of Poverty in BC,"
Mhm.
Mm.
and that was done by, it was in partnership with the Public Health of BC and the Canadian Centre for Policy and Alternatives. And it was, there was somebody, I might get the name wrong, Idlika Ianova,
Oh, yes.
and she did these wonderful videos
She's
about
awesome.
about the cost of poverty, and I remember watching those and going, wow, like again, that was kind of before I even cared about poverty, honestly. But so like again, I was following you guys, and I was following all this stuff about poverty even before I cared about it. And I remember watching these videos going, these are really wonderful because they really, she had these videos where it basically said that the cost of poverty in BC, just BC alone, was anywhere between 8.1 8.1 to 9.2 billion dollars per year.
Mm.
And again, this is just BC alone. That's what they calculated. The cost of poverty is between 8.1 to 9.2 billion dollars per year.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to say that from from the breakdown, roughly there's the health and crime portion of that 9 billion accounts for maybe $2 billion of it, like I think a little bit over, because you got they made some what do you want to call it, direct correlations. They said basically that BC's poorest 20% uh, use are using a much greater share of the public health care, for example. And then when you talk about crime, it's saying that, people in precarious situations of like precarious housing, they take bigger risks, like, stealing or staying with the abusive spouse or something like that. Like they put themselves in really precarious, dangerous situations that
Mm.
they wouldn't necessarily put themselves in. But, things like poverty will do that to a person, right? And yeah, so I just wanted to start there, I guess,
Mm.
too, and acknowledge. And I think what I'll do, I'll put a few links down on all these reports that and one of these, like I said, is the cost of poverty. I titled the thumbnail "The Cost of Poverty,"
Mhm.
so I just wanted to acknowledge that it wasn't my that's not my thumbnail. I'm acknowledging that, that it was a report done way back in 2011, and it's still top of mind even like
Yep.
14 years ago, or 14, so yeah.
Long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I would love for those numbers to be updated because I'm sure the costs have gone
Oh,
extremely far
I'm
up.
sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
billion plus.
Ontario put out a report, I think this past year, and their numbers have gone up significantly, but BC hasn't, updated those numbers.
Mhm.
It's a very compelling argument. So I think it's a really good
Yeah.
framing for poverty and how we talk about it.
Hmm.
Yeah, I find that BC doesn't like to update their numbers too much on the current stats of especially like the caseload in the current budget. The caseload, the amount that was actually put into the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, the amount was put into the caseload so that more recipients that are coming on board that are applying will now get the income, but the current recipients that are actually on the system did not receive any increases.
Yeah.
All they're doing is keeping status quo, keeping the current status going without, they call it, there's no cutbacks. Well, not increasing rates is called a clawback in my view. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say too, like, as part of my research for doing this podcast, is I actually did look at a few different reports, one of which was directly from BC Housing. But as you said, um, they're very good at hiding their numbers.
Mm,
Like, if I was in charge of BC Housing, the very start, like the very first page of our report, I would say, we're BC Housing. We're in charge of 50,000 housing stock in BC. And we also support 30,000 people in SAFERs and RAP programs. But they don't say that. They don't say that. So I had to look elsewhere on other reports
mm,
and put it all together, because their own report didn't say any of that.
nope.
You see what I'm saying? They hide everything. We said in the last podcast, it's a black hole there. Like everything just kind of goes in black hole, and it's like, trust us, we know what we're doing. And it's like, well, how many housing starts are you supporting? It's like, well, don't ask us. You know, it's like, and there's this big waiting list, but don't ask us how long it is and how long you have to wait for, and all. It's just a big black hole, and it's like, I don't know. It's just so stupid. So, like, in order to find all this information that I have on tap today, I didn't like going to the BC housing reports, didn't tell me anything. I had to look elsewhere. I had to look elsewhere
You had to
to,
do the Easter egg hunt,
oh,
Neil.
it's
That's a,
just,
yeah.
you know, yeah, crazy.
It's
Yeah.
interesting too. Like some of the costing stuff is so useful to think about. And interestingly, the Green Party, the BC Green Party, costed out what it would cost to raise income and disability assistance up to just the poverty line, like just
Hmm.
bare minimum that we've decided people should live at. But the government hasn't done that kind of costing, so you have to kind of look around and find it. And it's
Right.
honestly, in the grand scheme of the budget, wouldn't actually cost that much to raise people out of poverty. The poverty
No.
itself costs way more to respond to. And so it seems like a no-brainer, but obviously
Yeah.
there's political mechanisms at play, but it wouldn't actually be that complex to raise people out of poverty in BC.
I
No.
remember at one point, Rowan, there was the stats were, I mean, this is going back years now, but it was to raise people out of poverty up to the poverty level, financial support. I believe at one point it was like $1.2 billion. And that was for people on disability assistance, income assistance, and
Mm.
seniors. Like it was three categories, 1.2. Now that number is actually probably about 2 billion, I'm guessing, maybe ballpark figure because of the inflation cost of living. And again, I mean, to the government, that's chunk change. Like that means nothing. I mean, especially when they start hiring and firing and hiring and firing within there. I mean, I was watching a question period in the legislature yesterday online here. I mean, there was just like four people. I mean, and I added up, wow, that's over almost like $2 billion right there. So, I
Yeah.
mean, that goes to show they do have the money. It's that political will to
Yeah.
actually go and get that done. Now I wanted to get your view about the mentioned about the cost of living. Now the government loves to go with the market basket measure versus the LICO, which is the low income cutoff measure, right? So there's that two of them, but the provincial wants to go with the MBM because they said their federal counterparts, that's what they're going with. But that, of course, that's the lesser amount, and that doesn't capture all the goods and services within the market basket. It doesn't cover your rent. It definitely does not cover the rent, or if it does, it's a tiny little sliver. And the reality is, we know that people are having to pay the majority of their income in accommodation, and nothing left for bills and food and you name it, right? Your basic essentials.
Yeah, I think there's challenges, honestly, with both measures because, things like debt aren't accounted for, things like the extra cost of having a disability, for example, like there's a lot of different pieces that aren't fully captured in either of those metrics as far as I'm concerned. Like, I think there's one called material deprivation indexed or something like that, but it isn't used by the government, so it's not all that useful in terms of actual practicalities and implementation. But yeah, you're right. The provincial government largely uses the MBM. I've seen the other one in other publications, and it's they're not easy to compare, and so it's challenging when we don't even have an appropriate measure to see what people's actual sort of material realities look like day to day.
I think the last time I looked at some of the stats, they're saying on average, it's if it was a LICO formula, I think it's around 28, and I think the MBM's like 26, so like $2,600 a month. Now that's on top. It should be on top of your provincial, disability. I know that the BC Greens wanted to get it up to $2,400. That was part of the agreement with the NDP. But now, of course, as we all know, I mean, economically, what's going on around the world, that's kind of put a little halt on that situation. Economic uncertainty, they call it. Yeah. But, the problem is these issues happened before tariffs were put on. Like, they were pre-existing a situation that's just been neglected to be dealt with over time. And now, how convenient, right? I mean, tariffs now, we have to deal with the tariff issue. But I always say be proactive, and I mean, they have a lot of time to work on getting this done. I think that the target levels, they call it their 10-year target plan. I think the 10-year target plan should have been enacted a lot more stringent. Those target numbers should have been a lot higher, rather than 25% for persons with disabilities, and then there was 50%, I think, for children. I believe it was to get them out of poverty. I think those numbers should have been a lot higher, the target, and then steps to get to that target. That's my view.
Totally. I think it's interesting too. If you look at the BC budget this past year for 2025, they put aside $4 billion in case of tariffs to sort of economically prepare us. But in my view, the best thing we could do to economically prepare ourselves for tariffs would be to elevate the people living in the deepest levels of poverty. Like, based on the numbers from the BC Greens, we could get everybody out of deep poverty, and that would create economic resilience for folks when the tariffs arrive. So it feels frustrating to see those decisions being made about what seem like could be quite simple.
I wanted to go back to, I'm glad you're all talking about the BC Greens, actually, because I wanted to kind of circle back and kind of stay with BC Greens for a bit, because the numbers that I have seen reported is BC Greens have said that it's going to be anywhere from $2 billion to $2.5 billion. That was the numbers that I saw, was between 2 and 2.5 billion to raise everybody up and out of poverty. And that sounds like a lot. Admittedly, but if we go back to that 2011 report, it said that the cost of poverty is, $2.5 billion to do nothing, to just do the status quo is costing at least $2.5 billion. So why not take that $2.5 billion and actually reduce poverty and not just sit on your hands? You know what I mean? And the other thing that bugs me too is for years and years and years, the government says, well, we can't afford $2 billion. That's crazy. But with axing of the carbon tax, all of a sudden the government says, "Oh, we can afford $2 billion." No, because they
Mhm.
just got rid of $2 billion worth of tax revenue, just like
Three,
that. It's like
3 billion.
snap.
Actually, it's 2.8 billion, almost 3 billion now.
Okay, so yeah, $3 billion gone.
Mhm.
And they're like, well, year after year after year, it's like we can't afford two or $3 billion or whatever, but they just did it. They just got rid of it. So obviously they can, because
Mhm.
they just did. They got rid of $2 billion or $3 billion, like you said, Brent. So
Yeah.
you know,
The part that really worries me is economically for people of low income is getting rid of $3 billion or two, almost 3 billion. Economic uncertainty, obviously, is that for people low income is going to have a detrimental effect on their financial well-being because that carbon tax. I mean, I know everyone wants to get rid of carbon tax, but the carbon, but of course on big industry it's still there, like it's so the big industry still has that section of carbon on there, but the low income, like for at the gas pump, and so they take 17 cents off there. To take 17 cents off to cost 3 billion, people want that the carbon tax credit that they got attached with their GST on quarterly payments. I mean, that's it doesn't seem like a lot of money, but like say $125, I mean, every quarter period. I mean, that puts, some food on the table, pays some bills, you know, keeps your lights turned on, I mean, you name it. And having that taken away and nothing to replace that carbon tax credit with, and then not increasing income assistance and disability rates for years on end. So now that's like a loss and a loss. And then individuals having to wait for a DTC federally. If they
yeah,
don't qualify, now that's another loss. You see what I mean? So you get
yeah.
all these losses and there's no income to replace that.
Because we already know that not everybody's going to get that $200. Like probably less than half are going to actually qualify for that $200, right?
Yeah, well, some of the stats that I've been hearing is at least 80% of the recipients aren't going to qualify
Yeah,
for that.
that's a lot of people not going to qualify.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, the carbon tax was one of the only wealth distribution that we had towards low income people in our
Hmm.
taxation
And now they
system.
got rid of it, and they're like, well, we can we can handle it, no problem. One of the things I want to kind of do too, and I mean, everybody has to be on board to do this. I don't know if we want to spend the time to do this or not, but I would just kind of think again to kind of prepare for today's show. I kind of wanted to spitball. Like, I think the probably the biggest piece of poverty is secure housing, right? I
Mhm.
think I mean
Mhm.
secure housing has to be number one. It has to be kind of the number one issue. Is if you give somebody some secure housing, that's going to solve like a crap load of poverty right there, right? And so
Mhm.
I wanted to take a little bit of time and talk about housing a little bit. We'll spend a little time talking about that because again, like I researched and maybe my reports that I found are wrong. So anybody listening to this, if they want to correct some of the numbers that I found, fine. That's okay. So, like I said, after this show is done, I'm gonna link the reports that I found, and then if somebody wants to challenge the reports that I found, they can. But I just wanted to say that the numbers that I found was let's start here is that the total population of BC is 5.7 million right now. And the total homes in BC is 2.1 million. Okay. So these are numbers that I just happened to find. Okay. And then I also found so we have 5.7 million living in BC, 2.1 million homes, and then of the BC housing stock of homes, it's around 50,000 homes or 50,000 units is BC housing stock. Again, these are numbers that I found.
Mhm.
And then on top of that, from what I found is that there's also rental assistance.
Mhm.
So that's the safer programs, that's the RAP programs, and that accounts for another 30,000 units. So in total, you have 80,000 units, okay? And so then if you take 80,000 subsidized units as part of all of the houses in BC,
Mhm.
that accounts to about 3.8% of all housing in BC. And so
Oh,
that actually kind of
oof.
seems to wash kind of makes sense that
Yeah,
number to me.
yeah,
Mhm.
So I think I think those calculations are correct, but again, I can
right.
stand to be corrected on that. So having those numbers there, let's talk about this for a second. Like let's pretend that Sheila Malcolmson is listening right now. Here's my suggestion
Oh,
for Sheila Malcolmson, because you had one about portable you had one about portable the portable
Oh, the
what do you
modular
want?
housing.
No, the subsidies. You said you gave her the idea of having a portable rental subsidy, right? But I kind of want to make it even a simpler idea than that. Like if
Mhm.
we just do the simple thing of raising the rates,
Yeah.
forget about making things portable, like rent subsidies portable, just raise the rates to another 500 bucks and apply that immediately to the rental portion or to the shelter portion.
Mhm.
So your shelter portion goes from $500 a month to $1,000 a month, right? So you kind of follow me there. So right off the bat, you've got $1,000 in your shelter portion right now, and then you've got about $1,000 of support income, like your for your food and your whatever else, right? So it's about a half thing. You've got your shelter at 1,000, and you've got your living expenses at 1,000. Okay, so that's about $2,000 total. And so if they did that, okay, like and then you had something like where right off the bat, like if you take your example, Brent,
mhm,
of you and Sonia, that
mhm,
would mean that you both would have $1,000 to put towards shelter,
mhm,
right? So that would mean that you could comfortably stay in you could comfortably stay in the rental market if you wanted to. And then my idea would be that those that wanted to stay in BC housing,
mhm,
uh, let's say they're subsidized at say $700 a month of subsidy. Well, then the government could say, well, if you're in a subsidized thing, we'll give you the $1,000, but then we'll take back say 300 of that and then reinvest that $300 back into a BC Builds program where you're reinvesting into creating more units. You see?
uh,
Um, so let's say I was kind of figuring like roughly uh let's say if the government had say $150 per month or even $300 a month. Let's say $300 a month extra
mhm,
per month for every unit. So let's say the average was $700 of subsidized rent. So
mhm,
they take that $300 extra, put it back, reinvest it. So
mhm,
then you have it's 50,000 units of
mhm.
housing stock times 4,000 dollars a year. That works out to $200 million dollars. Just so that's $200 million that you can reinvest in the housing, which translates into two 2,000 units of extra housing every year. That's without even trying. Without even trying, you could do that. Now I've maybe I've spent way too long on this, but I just wanted to like spitball that idea.
It sounds very interesting, actually.
Yeah,
What's
like
your take on that, Rowan?
yeah. What do you think? Is that like
Yeah.
kind of
I like
outside the box too much or what?
No, I like the idea of it, but I've heard from some folks that like if their shelter rate goes directly to their housing program or to a landlord, that it could be that if you raise the shelter rate, that money's not actually going to go into the pocket of the person who actually like needs that money. Like I think the shelter rate sometimes goes directly to a landlord or to a like a BC housing program. And
Mm,
there's no guarantee that BC housing is going to take that extra money and then reinvest it into building more units or like doing appropriate repairs and things like
mm,
that. My
Yeah,
my like preference would be that you take that and give cash to people so they can spend their money how they want. Like, I think that like increasing the shelter rate doesn't necessarily equate to lifting people out of poverty, just in the way that it's been designed in terms of some of the
Yeah.
programs. So that would be my like concern about it. But I like the thought of like, why aren't we redirecting, from
Yeah.
housing?
And I know that was Shane Simpson's. Remember that he said that he just wanted
Mhm.
to raise the rates, not on the shelter but on the other thing, just
Yeah,
so that it was just giving the money. But
I know that I know that Shane Simpson, Neil, that he wanted to. One of his plans was when he was minister for social development and poverty reduction was a high recommendation. I'm not sure if you knew this, Rowan, but I know he wanted to get rid of the shelter portion altogether and just make it as the support or call it a brand new name, like give it I don't know, BC benefits or whatever it may be. And because he said at the end of the day, people pay their rent. So the money is going to go to however they
Yeah.
want it to go or pay their bills, buy their food, etc.
Mhm.
Because he said the shelter, he said, if we keep raising it, again, um, some of the landlords, I mean, he said, I mean, there's some really good landlords out there, but there's some shady landlords too that are going to take advantage of it and say, well, they raised the shelter. Well, then, you're going to pay more, or I can, in a private, say a private landlord,
Yeah.
well, you can pay this much, or can you afford to pay this much because you're getting
Mhm.
this much now in your shelter. But if you overall put it to the base amount, well, then that actually shows that the overall check. Because I guess I mean, in my view, is if they do it to an overall check, um, if a person is housed, or maybe they don't have a permanent address. Now,
Mhm.
maybe they're couch surfing, or they're just maybe staying at a friend's place because they can't afford the high market rent. Now they've still got their main check. If they didn't have the shelter and it was just their main check, now they could go to maybe a corporate landlord. Maybe they say, well, this is my money. Oh, okay. Versus if they say they didn't have their shelter because they didn't have a permanent address, now they'll say, well, now I've got 983 or 900 and $983, right? Versus the $500 now that was topped up from 375. I mean, my gosh. But anyway, so it would look better having a full amount versus a smaller amount, because then they're going to say, well, so you can we're going to rent to you on this amount. Well, no, if you rent to me, I'm going to get an extra $500.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's one problem that I ran into one time through a corporate landlord, where one of the managers said, well, okay, so if you don't have an address, I go, I have an address. I go, and so the manager said, what if you didn't have an address? The government would take away this 375 away from you. I go, correct. So now this is the amount. So now you come to me and say, well, this is the amount. What incentive do I have to rent to you on this? Now you're telling me, well, they're going to give me 375 if you rent to me. You see, so it actually puts a bunch of question marks in place
Yeah.
of the corporate landlord, because they say, well, how are you going to live? Versus saying, well, this is the amount, take it or leave it. And, if
Uh,
you're a responsible tenant, then yeah, you'll
yeah,
pay.
I guess I mean I understand I understand totally the logic of getting rid of this of the shelter completely. I get that too, totally.
Yeah.
And I understand why Shane Simpson back in the day decided to just put it on the living portion, right? Not on the shelter portion. But my thing is twofold in the sense that I'm acknowledging right now the way the system is set up is that basically all the power lies with the landlords, right? I mean, and the government acknowledges that too. And
Mhm.
I don't think that power share agreement is really gonna change or shift, right? Like, I mean, let's be honest. I don't think that's gonna change or shift. So if you're just being honest with ourselves and say that power share agreement is not going to change, it's going to stay. The power is going to stay with the landlords, then if you acknowledge that, then that's kind of why I'm saying, if you acknowledge that the power is staying with the landlords, then just give the money to the landlords. And then like you were saying, Rowan, like you don't trust maybe the BC Housing. Well, BC Housing is supposed to be run by like under the umbrella of government. So it's it would be under the government's best practices is to make sure that they have enough policing going on to make sure that those rents stay in line always, and there's lots of checks and balances, right? So the only thing you have to really worry about if you were to throw $1,000 to a shelter portion would be to control the bad landlords of the market in the market arena, right? The market rents. But you see what I'm saying? Like I'm like if you go with my idea, I'm just acknowledging that the power is already given to the landlords anyway.
Mhm.
Mm.
So if you acknowledge that, then that's what I'm saying is like
Yeah.
Yeah.
just raise the shelter rate to a logical level because I mean like the $500
The
shelter.
keyword logical.
Well, yeah, $500 shelter is pink unicorn territory, right? We know that $500 shelter does not exist. It's a pink unicorn. It does not exist, right? So if it doesn't exist, like at least if you threw $1,000 in instead, you're acknowledging, okay, here we're getting to the territory of, sort of realistic. So if you had two people, like in the case of Brent and Sonia, they then have $2,000 of disposable rental income to put towards housing. So I guess, yeah, I'm just acknowledging that the power share is already with the landlords and it's probably going to stay with the landlords. So that being the case, then that's why I just want to throw that money into that bracket instead, right? But I understand the logic on both sides of wanting to not put it there too.
Interesting on that. I just wanted to add on to that part too, and then there was another topic that I want to kind of dive into and get Rowan's view on it. So in 2023, the last update from the province was a $125 increase to the shelter from 375 to 500, but the recipients in market housing had to show that they actually had a rent increase. Well, anyone in market housing in general got an increase unless they rent from a basement suite or somewhere else in a house, and maybe that the owner decided not to increase their rent, and if they didn't get that increase. But of course, in BC housing, no recipients got that 125 increase, only in market housing. With that being said, what is your view on the vacancy? They call vacancy control, Rowan. Like, so for instance, we have some nasty neighbors who live above us, and I mean, of course, corporate management, they would love it if we moved out of here because they could get at least $1,800 for this unit at minimum. Of course, if we go to another unit in the building, we're going to be paying minimum $1,800. I mean, we're pretty well grandfathered in, so I mean, our rent is I mean, anyone say, well, I would kill to have your rent. I go, well, you wouldn't have our rent because as soon as we move out, you move in. You're going to be paying what the market will bear on the unit. So with vacancy control, if we were to move, a new tenant moves in, they're going to be paying what we're paying right now. What is your like? I don't know. I mean, maybe it's an awkward question, but I mean, especially to reduce poverty. I mean, I guess I kind of look at it as the poverty issue is because it keeps things affordable. I mean, corporate landlords, I mean, management, they would not like vacancy control at all, right? Because they say, well, that'll affect our bottom line. But I always look at it as get people housed. I mean, give people opportunity to be housed and pay what they can afford to pay. I mean, because it gets to a point where market rents are so high, or you get your rent increase notices annually, and then people become unhoused. So I guess I look at it as that's a way of reducing down the cost of rent. And then when you get those increases, well, at least you've got a little bit of buffer room to work with. And then if the province did their part, increased the rates, now you've got a little bit of wiggle room and work on both sides.
Totally. Yeah, I agree. And as a renter, I fully understand. Like, I'm in my apartment and I'm like,
Yeah.
I can never move because rent has gone up so drastically
Yeah.
since I moved
Yeah.
in here. And
Yeah.
it really keeps people stuck in places. And, I think it's such a loophole. So we're super pro vacancy control. We've done a ton of advocacy work asking for, the unit to be tied to a price rather than, it jacking up every time anybody moves.
Yeah.
I think part of the challenge is that, many people in public office aren't renters and don't understand how the loopholes are impacting people. And like looking at what market rent is, it's, like you're never going to find an apartment for $500, like you said, Neil. It's impossible. And so people are, kind of stuck in not great apartments or unable to, have a strong relationship with their landlord because any kind of like complaint and they might get evicted and lose their housing and not be able to afford sort of the rent. So yeah, definitely pro vacancy control. I think you're right. And I also just wanted to comment on the previous point too. Like, I don't mean to say that BC housing is, being super unaccountable or things like that. They've just been like deeply underfunded for so long, and the stock is old and crumbling in some cases, and the wait lists for BC housing are like 10, 20 years for some specific suites. So I think there's a lot of consistent housing underfunded that is happening, and we really need to be promoting supportive and social housing stock in BC in particular. And that is, I think, where the biggest gap is in terms of our housing policy for the province right now. I think there's been just decades of not making non-market housing and public and social housing programs that can really help people. So yeah,
I just wish that the BC housing would be more transparent with their numbers, like I said earlier. Because like I said, so much of that is just like a black hole, and it's like, trust us, it's going to a black hole, but trust us. And the fact that I had to go to other reports other than the BC housing report to actually find proper numbers of how much stock they actually have. Like, why can't that be the first page of, like I said, the first page of the document? We support 50,000 units of actual subsidized housing, and then an additional $30,000 units of RAP and SAFERs for seniors. I mean, how hard? That's 2 lines of text. How hard is it to put 2 lines of text at the beginning of a document?
It should be public.
Well, what would be your view about extending like they got the RAP and they got the SAFERS program? I mean, people who do access those programs can still live in market housing, or they can live in their own home, they can rent a basement suite, they can still have access to those programs. What would be how hard would it be, or your view would be, to extend that over to PWD in market housing? Because right now, according to the government, if you are a PWD and you receive shelter portion, you don't qualify for that program. If it was RAP or of course there's SAFERS, but if it was a PWD component put in place, now it would be, a person could now stay in their own home and they could actually have that subsidized program. The only concern, before I get your response on it, my only concern is that because it falls under the BC housing criteria, then they've got all that red tape bureaucracy that's involved. So it's the household income can't exceed a certain amount, blah, blah. That's my only concern, but I think it would be brilliant. I asked the Minister for Social Development Poverty Reduction one time when I had her on, Honorable Sheila Malcolmson, and she said, her response was, "That's brilliant, Brent. I love your suggestion." I mean, it would be brilliant only if there was not all the red tape bureaucracy that went along with that.
Yeah, agreed. And I think the more we can give people options about where they want to be living, the better. Like, and providing people the tools to do that is excellent. I think also it's interesting just to, like, I think this is a good example of like the amount of bureaucracy and red tape and complexities of these systems that keep people in poverty is like just so elaborate. It's such an elaborate trap for folks.
Oh yeah, and it's always there's always that more to do excuses. Oh, fiscal situation allows, or economic uncertainty, the reasons not to let people out of poverty. And stats show that it costs so much more to keep people in legislative poverty. It puts major strain on our healthcare system in so many different doors to the healthcare system, and basically raising rates is the number one key to help alleviate or in some cases eliminate poverty. When people are homeless, it causes a lot more trauma, physical, mental, their well-being, for themselves and on society and on our healthcare system. In general, and then to get them housed after that, and now it costs them even more to get them housed because you have to find the right appropriate housing for the individual. Is it, if they have a disability, is it wheelchair accessible or any kind of accessibility that gets involved in it, and yeah, and because we know, I mean, housing crisis, I mean, it's try to find affordable housing anyway. So my motto is always keep people housed if they can keep them housed, and cause prevent the preventables, preventables. Yeah. So I would say pre-existing issue is be proactive and actually do. And I mean, it goes back to that report, all those reports that came out, and just astonished that the government is not even looking at those and high recommendations to meet any of those targets. They did like a 360 and decided, no, we're not going to go with any of these. We're going to go with oh well, we hear that the recipient work is the best solution. Oh well, I mean that's crazy.
Well, that service document that we shared the other day from Sheila Malcolmson,
Oh yeah.
the 2025 to 2028 service document for the Social Development Ministry.
I saw that. Yes.
I got a kind of a bad comment on because I posted it over to BC Disability Caucus, and
Oh yeah.
somebody says, "Well, like you shouldn't just say stuff about it if you're you know without posting the actual link." And so then I actually did. I said, "Well, I'll post the link, and then you can decide whether it was a fluff piece or not." Because I mean, I actually did, like, how you can do a find thing on any document.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked for
Keyword
the
search.
word, I looked for the word rate. I looked for the word rate in the document. And guess what I found? I found
Zero.
things, I found things like, I found words like moderate, uh,
Mhm.
uh, literate, or or like poverty rate. I found that you know
Kind of like little breadcrumbs here and there.
words like obliterate or decorate or whatever, those were in there.
Oh
Word
no.
All,
salad.
all,
Word
all
salad.
those were
Word
all
salad.
those words were in there. Obliterate and decorate, but there was no like rate increase. And also I did a word search for PWD income assistance. Like
Mhm.
that's a very common word
Yeah.
phrase for, or at least it should be for for the
One would think
BC Ministry of Social Development. And there's not one
so.
mention of PWD income assistance in that document, in the
Oh my.
20-page document. Not even one mention of PWD income assistance.
Ooh.
So, and like I said, so anything to do with rate was like considerate or obliterate or decorate or anything like that. But
Terrible.
it was nothing about rates, like raising the rates. Yeah,
Mhm.
Mhm.
That's funny,
yeah,
Neil. Our team did the same thing with the BC budget. We like word finded the word poverty just to see
Yeah.
like how much of
yeah,
a priority is this. I think it yeah, I can't remember if this year or the last year's budget. It didn't appear one time. It was shocking.
yeah.
Yeah. I was watching it live on the BC budget and listening to the new minister going through it and listening for poverty, anything to do with the word poverty or rates, and all of a sudden gets up and then I'm like, wow, my jaw dropped and like just gets up and okay, well everyone's like cheering. I'm going, okay,
Yeah,
did I miss something here? And I'm combing right away through all the budget. Okay, maybe I missed something. Nope.
you did
And
not. Yeah, you did not.
wow,
Real focus on affordability, but also
yeah,
like
Yeah.
affordability for the middle class has been set, which
Yeah.
is,
yeah.
I think, quite shocking.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a complete missed opportunity again. And when I talked to my corporate manager. I have a very good relationship with my corporate manager. I mean, they're really wonderful people. And some people say, "Oh, careful," because I mean, some of them can really be nasty. Well, I mean, they can only be nasty as they want them to be nasty, right? If you're respectful to them, they're going to be respectful back. And the comment I get all the time, Rowan, is, "Why didn't they raise your rates?" That was last year. Why
Mhm.
didn't you raise your rates this year? We gave you a rent increase notice. Like, right. Good question.
Yeah.
And so last year I actually got on the CKNW and they had a phone in show and they said, ask the premier any question and be very precise, right to the point. And they get to know who I am. I phone the radio station. So they go, okay, Brent, you got 30 seconds, go. It's like, boom. It's like they know who I am. So I just rambled it right off. And the response I
Mhm.
got was not what I expecting. I mean, it was okay, yeah, like thanks, yeah. And we've raised the earnings exemptions, and if you haven't looked into that, maybe you should. and thinking,
Wow.
Yeah.
and I thought, wow, like that's
Like
not
mansplaining.
yeah,
Yeah, so
That's
condescending.
that's great from a premier, right? Like
yeah,
mansplaining. Like Brent, if you
yeah.
haven't figured it out yet,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's like we don't want to raise the rates, but we're going to raise the earnings exemption. So it's that's really
yeah,
that's telling someone who say they're homeless.
Mm.
Well, hey, we're going to give you a tent, but you have to go and find the right one first. But how do you find it when you got no money? Well, it's not my problem,
yeah.
But yeah, maybe it's a little bit different, but yeah, I mean, it was quite disappointing, right? Always say missed opportunity. I would say do the right thing. And I mean, there's so many people with lived experience, and I mean, a lot of advocacy groups, the government just completely ignored them, and all of us, and it just doesn't make any sense. Where to basically create a positive outlook on on society is give people a heads up, a lift up, and they can put money back into the community, back into society, and better their life and their health, their well-being. I mean, everything in general, everything will prosper. I mean, if you give people that the resources. It's like transit, same thing. It just drives me batty that the government can basically put all their money and give themselves all these rate increases right across. Meanwhile, you got TransLink who's saying, well, we got a $600 million shortfall. We're going to cut massive service if we don't get any help. And there was nothing in the budget for TransLink either, or transit. I thought, oh my gosh,
No, and then
Mhm.
they announced transit cuts too, so it's
Yeah.
really,
yeah,
time
it's
for
huge. I just say, affordability is give everybody a bus pass. I mean, it's already paid for. I mean, by property taxes across the regions, and it's like seniors. They'll have their $45 a year bus pass, but PWD don't have theirs. As we know, I mean, it got taken away years ago.
Mhm.
It's a shell game, but I mean, I still want to see it replaced. I mean, it should
Yeah.
just be replaced and just bring back to the way it was, and then allow PWD to keep that $52 if they've opted out of that bus pass. Here, you can keep it, but here's a complimentary bus pass. If you don't want to use it, you don't have to use it. It's there.
Yeah.
And that gives it creates more mobility wise. It gets people out in the community because otherwise they're stuck at home, right? They say, "Well, I've opted out. I need the money to buy groceries." Now they go without transportation.
Well,
So
that's the
Mhm.
thing I said the other day too. Is that there's this sort of this stratification of disability where it's like red PWD or orange PWD versus blue PWD. Like
yeah,
they have all these like
have and have not.
groups of PWD now. It's like you can have and you can't. You can have and you can't. And it's just like crazy. Like,
Mhm.
how is that equitable, right? It's not.
No.
And I guess my closing comment, because we're getting close to the closing comment section would be, the simplest solution would be to raise the rates
Mhm.
because then you're actually empowering individuals themselves to make their own decisions. You're saying to that individual, you know what, you have the brain in your head to decide what you want to do that's best for you.
Mhm.
uh, that you can manage your own finances. We'll give you the money, and you can manage that money because you know best. And that's the simplest thing. Because I mean, yeah, you can talk about portable subsidies and all that, but it can get messy, right?
Mhm.
But I mean, the only thing stopping raising the rates is that $2 billion that the government doesn't want to invest. But having said that, they were quite willing to flush. They were quite willing to flush the carbon tax, and that's two to $3 billion. And they're quite willing to flush like $2.5 billion a year in crime and health budget overruns.
Mhm.
So you know,
In my view, I think the economic downturn. I think that he should have just left the carbon tax in temporarily and got through the hurdle, and it wouldn't have been another $3 billion hole in the BC budget. So instead of almost not almost $10 billion, now they're saying it could be up to like 14, 13 with the other. But and then the people on low income would still get that carbon tax credit until you get through that hurdle. Then they can work on replacing the carbon tax credit with something else to help offset it or raise, as you said, just raise PWD rates. and help anyone low income or income assistance. I mean, those rates are pathetic on low on the income too, which is terrible. I want to see those rates increase too on income assistance, absolutely, and seniors too. It's let them live with dignity and respect, and it's terrible. I mean, in the budget, I looked at the seniors rates too because I was quite curious to see the increase that they have. I think it was $125 increase they have on their subsidy. So yeah, from what there was, I think was it 7? Maybe you could correct me on the figure on that. I know it was a $125 increase anyway, but that's nothing. It should be a lot higher than that, especially with the cost of living inflation. And I think the government can do a lot better than that. Absolutely. Also, a quick comment. I want to throw something in here before we, get closer to the end of the show. So BC Housing, Rowan. So the criteria, I had made a phone call. I was quite curious, and the gentleman actually hung up the phone on me. Actually, which wasn't very nice. But I guess I must have hit the wrong button on the question I had was. So I said, if people in the community, they need housing. He goes, right, we're the housing provider. I go, right. So if I walk down to the nearest bus stop and someone says, well, do you know where there's a place to rent? And I refer you over to BC Housing, over the BC Housing, and I wanted to come with that person and said, hey, can I share a place with that person? You know what their response was? No. It's either individual or family, or if you're in a relationship, common law, or married,
or homeless,
or homeless. And they said,
or fleeing violence, which is like, I mean, that's legitimate for sure.
Yeah, and that's kind of where they said the criteria was at, and I said, well, I mean, that needs to be changed. Then they're like, sir, and there's criteria in there for a reason. I said, well, isn't it your job to keep people housed? I mean, rather than unhoused? I mean, does it make really a difference if you got two people who get along with each other, but they're not in a relationship? Does it make a difference? Oh, it does. I said, so in market housing, you could have 10 people living in one unit, which is illegal. But you could, and it's not illegal. But in our BC Housing, they don't. That's the criteria. And I said, well, so it's as a recommendation then. He goes, it's not a recommendation at all. The government sets these policies in place, and we have to follow the mandate of how they have that in. I said, so in your view, would you like to see that changed? He goes, I follow what the policy is. Okay. And then all of a sudden he hung up the phone on me.
Wow.
I'm like, wow, okay. I was like, okay,
right.
is the wrong thing here? Like,
Wow. Yeah, that's surprising. I didn't know that. I mean, I guess it doesn't really surprise me now that I'm thinking about it, but it is,
oh yeah, he said like you have to be, you have to have either the children or you have to be in a relationship. You can't just say, well, I have a friend who wants a place and can they move in with me? Nope. And he says, and then they have to be under one file under BC Housing, and then you got to be finding the housing where we provide it. We'll give you a list, and you will basically try to find the housing close to where you need it. But you have 2 times an option to choose. If you say no the first time, that's fine. Second time, otherwise, we put you back on the waiting list. And if your needs aren't greater, then there's a long waiting list. I said, yeah, up to like 20 years. Okay, well, that you're telling me it's 20 years. It's not 20 years. I go, actually, okay, well, maybe let's average it out. And we're between 10 and 20 years. And so he didn't like that. Or, I mean, I already knew the facts. I already had this stuff in front of me, right? I'm thinking, wow, okay. So, yeah, it's crazy. And that's why I recommend that, because there's such a strain on the system to get extended over to PWD, over to market housing, or just raise the rates and let people make that autonomy decision.
Yeah.
Maybe that's probably even better. Let people just make that decision where they want to live. And it also take away the barriers between provinces, where people, if they have an opportunity going, maybe they want to stay with a relative in another province for a while, they could just go. They can actually automatically have their file transferred to another province. So they don't have to reapply to BC if they're disabled. I mean, God forbid. I mean, it's like that CDB same thing. That's another topic in itself. We'll have to
Yeah.
have you on another show, but yeah, a lot of gong show on that, and I guess the provincial government, they are focusing on that CDB so much in their budget. That was one thing that's on there is CDB. Well, I think again, it's a missed opportunity. I think it's an excuse of knowing that, well, most people aren't going to qualify for it. So let's just throw it in there, saying this is what we did, and we'll run with it. But that supercomputer should fix the problem, I think. Eh?
Well, and most people won't qualify for it, and it's way less than people need to actually be lifted out of poverty. So
yeah, and it's based on household income too. So yeah, up to yeah.
No, I mean, even if they did rate, let's be let's be pie in the sky here,
okay.
and let's say even if they did raise the rates by $500,
right,
that's still below poverty.
Way below. Yeah.
So,
and even if they get that $200, they're still way below.
So it's crazy.
Well, Rowan, I guess we'll go to our final statements, and then I guess we'll call it a wrap for today. And I'd love to have you back on whenever it's convenient to you, and we'll continue on the saga of how to end legislative poverty in BC on another show.
We waited too long to have you on again. I apologize.
So much to talk about. I know.
It was fun. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I always enjoy talking with you both. And I'm sure there's more we could unpack around all of these different pieces. And we didn't even get into the Canada Disability Benefit too much.
No.
Yeah,
and that's because that's quite a quite a lengthy situation where all the red tape bureaucracy again it got embedded in it. And when it first got announced, it was supposed to be historic, and it was supposed to be modeled after the GIS, for seniors, guaranteed income supplement, and it was supposed to be barrier free. It was supposed to automatically go to every PWD across Canada and territories. Just because the CRA already has the information. When you file your income tax, the T5007, CRA automatically has it. And why I know that is I talked to CRA and I said, so when I go to file my income tax, you guys already have that information, correct? We get a copy of it from the provincial government, and then we're just waiting on you to file your income tax. We compare that information. So we already have that information. I said, so when they said, when government says we can't do the CDB, we already have the information. Like we make that determination. Wow. I said, okay. They're like, yeah, it's all red tape bureaucracy. It's she said, I can't get into it, sir, but in my view, I think that all PWD should automatically get it. And our system is designed where you would technically automatically get it because we send the transfer payments are sent to the provinces and then they administer. So we're in communication back and forth. So yeah, I think it's just like throw the ball back and forth. Your court.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But yeah, it's interesting. I know the Green Party, they advocated hard for the CDB to make sure it's barrier free, and there was a lot of success in that through the committee stage, and they really hammered at it. And kudos to MP Mike Morris from the Green Party in Kitchener, Ontario. He really made a lot of headway with that, and it was so disappointed where then the powers to be decided that no, thank you anyway, but we're going to go with this.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, gee, like talk about egg in the face, right?
We have to get Mike on again too. But I wanted to just before we wrap up too, I wanted to let our listeners know that you and I are going to be on a conference call with the new BC Green MLAs.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun because I don't really know too much about them. So it's our chance to kind of meet and greet with them and talk shop with them a little bit. So it'll be an interesting call, hopefully.
It's going to be really good. I did notice that basically new Green Party members in the BC Legislative Assembly have mentioned the word poverty, and that's a good sign that no other members in there want to talk about poverty, and so at least they're willing to have that conversation with us and see what they can do going forward and hold the provincial government to account.
Poverty is a four letter word for everybody else, right?
Or yeah, it doesn't, and it doesn't need to be a nasty word, right?
Yeah.
It affects anybody at any time. It can, and it will in some form or another. I mean, so we just need to put an end to legislative poverty. Absolutely. I mean,
Mhm.
and yeah, really, it benefits everybody in society. It puts less strain, like I say, on our healthcare system. I mean, as we know, healthcare system's already having a lot of problems already. So why add to it? I mean, yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Rowan. It's a great pleasure having you join us today, and definitely we'll have you back in the very near future, and we'll touch base on any new developments that are arising from the provincial government. Maybe they'll do an interim amount in between the budgets. I highly doubt it, but I mean we have
Yeah.
to just put strain on them so they will weaken them down. So they'll say, okay, fine, we screwed up, we made a mistake. Let's make it better. And I
Yeah.
mean, I don't expect bells and whistles. I mean, but they can do it. I'm sure they can do some kind of amendment. They've got the money there. They just choose not to do it because they don't live in the lived experience that people with disabilities or income assistance or seniors go through, or anybody on low income too. I don't want to exclude anybody out. Anybody in legislative poverty, I mean, they know what they go through on a day-to-day basis. And I know that a lot of people in the media and even some of the politicians, they'll say, people are living $200 away, paycheck to paycheck. Well, that number, I think it needs to be updated. I mean, people are living like maybe
Oh yeah.
25 or $50 away from,
Yeah.
so I think it's just more of a talking point, but I get it. Like, I understand when you hear it coming from them, they know the real answer, and how to fix it. And so, yeah, just holding them to account and getting things fixed. But thank you so much for tuning in today, everybody, and thank
Thanks,
you,
Ron.
and
Thanks for
have a great day.